It's impossible to write or talk about the Black Panther comics without confronting the iconography and the ghosts of black nationalism. This association has been there since the very beginning, although funny enough it was by and large a historical accident. Stan Lee and Jack Kirby had developed, named, and debuted Black Panther in July of 1966, only 3 months before Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale founded the Black Panthers. Marvel tried to sidestep the association by renaming the character Black Leopard in 1972, but the new name failed to stick, and the property has remained closely associated with images of black power.
Here was the primordial stuff of our own dream, the dream of a black race, of our own Tolstoys who lived deep in the African past, where we authored operas, pioneered secret algebra, erected ornate walls, pyramids, colossi, bridges, roads, and all the inventions that I then thought must qualify one's lineage for the ranks of civilization.
These are the images Ta-Nehisi Coates had to work with when he started writing Black Panther in 2016, and my interest in the comic is how he's used these images to explore and interrogate his own history with black nationalism. Coates' father, William Paul Coates, actually was a Black Panther before founding his own publishing company, Black Classic Press in Baltimore. Ta-Nehisi grew up reading Afrocentrist authors like Chancellor Williams and Kwame Ture, epic narratives that sang of powerful African nations, quasi-mythical societies of black nobles and kings. The very name Ta-Nehisi is a reference to one of these nations. Ta-Nehisi was the Egyptian name for the Kingdom of Nubia, a kingdom that conquered and ruled Egypt for 100 years. Ta-Nehisi Coates intellectually disavowed much of black nationalism and its tendency to mythologize as he grew as a scholar and a writer, but his work in Black Panther shows that these myths still play a powerful role in his imagination. T'Challa is not only a kick-ass superhero, but a brilliant scientist and the king of Wakanda, the most advanced country on Earth. And all of it is 100% bona fide sub-Saharan African. The king is black, the nation is black, the panther is black. Wakanda is deeply spiritual as well as technologically advanced. T'Challa's sister Shuri gains power and wisdom by traveling to the Jalia, a sort of atemporal dream time of Wakanda, something like the collective spirit of the country and its people. T'Challa has his own relationship with Wakanda's spiritual heritage. In times of crisis, he communes with the souls of the dead kings, his exalted ancestors, the Black Panther's past, and he calls upon the power of this ancient lineage to defeat his enemies. This is not black nationalism as a mere political strategy, but black nationalism as racial and spiritual identity. Wakanda is not merely a political body, but a nation with a soul and a metaphysical essence.
You must resist the common urge toward the comforting narrative of divine law, toward fairy tales that imply some irrepressible justice. The enslaved were not bricks in your road, and their lives were not chapters in your redemptive history. They were people turned to fuel for the American machine.
There's another side to Ta-Nehisi Coates, however, a side that's very interested in bodies, political and otherwise. In his second memoir, Between the World and Me, these mythological metaphors he uses to understand blackness are by and large put aside as he tries to understand race in terms of violence done to the body.
Racism is a visceral experience. It dislodges brains, blocks airways, rips muscle, extracts organs, cracks bones, breaks teeth.
Coates tries to understand the body as an absolute in this book, not a mere vessel for the soul of a person, but the person in itself, with all the terrifying implications that come with having the entirety of your being reduced down to what is merely flesh and bone.
I am flesh of their flesh, bone of their bone, created by them. My blood, my father's blood is in that soil.
Ta-Nehisi Coates wrote Between the World and Me as an explicit homage to James Baldwin in his book, The Fire Next Time. Like Coates, Baldwin demanded to understand the civil rights struggle not from a religious perspective like Malcolm X and MLK, but in terms of the real bodies of real people. What Baldwin really got, though, is that getting down to the real of the body requires you to take a hard look at all the names which lay claim to it. Christian, Muslim, black, white, American, African. Baldwin turned a critical lens on all these names swirling around and trying to lay claim to them in various ways.
I couldn't find out where it was because my entry into America is a bill of sale. And that stops you from going any further. At some point in our history, I became Baldwin's nigger. That's how I got my name.
I think Ta-Nehisi Coates is trying to perform a similar critique to Baldwin's, but the difference between them is that they are dealing with two very different names. It's one thing for Baldwin to critique the name Baldwin, the name of some white slave master that owned his ancestors centuries ago. What does it mean, though, for Ta-Nehisi to critique the name Ta-Nehisi, the name his father gave him, the name of the nation of black kings?
Do you have any hope tonight for the people out there about how we could be a better country, we had a better race relations, we have better politics?
No. I'm not the person you should go to for that.
Coates is very pessimistic about the future of race in America, and I think there's a certain cynicism in his choice to write Black Panther. He doesn't believe there will ever be a post-racial United States, and therefore he's unwilling to completely abandon the images of black nationalism. These images were developed as a defense against white supremacy, a way of making black powerful and making black beautiful in a country that insisted on seeing only black and white. Coates is not a racial realist. He believes that we're all just human beings and human bodies, but he recognizes that race is still a hard political fact, and that to live in 21st century America, you need to deal with and live its racial myths. However, even as Coates makes use of black nationalism and its images, he never fully indulges in them, and never forgets James Baldwin and that need to remember the body. It's true that Black Panther is full of these strong images that reinscribe blackness as an identity. The powerful warrior king, the long lines of ancestors, the Wakandan spirit realm. But Coates constantly interrogates those images, animating them with internal contradiction. In A Nation Beneath Our Feet, it is accepted as a narrative fact that Wakanda is a real metaphysical entity with a god-appointed king. But the story is all about political revolution springing up despite this hierarchy. It's about the need to find new political formation despite accepting the right of kings. In the second arc, Avengers of the New World, Coates takes a Pratchett-esque look at the gods of Wakanda, accepting them as real entities and yet at the same time showing that their power ultimately derives from their human worshippers. Both arcs make a thematic point of affirming Wakanda's racial and national myths, while showing that they don't rest easy. Coates shows that beneath all the myths and the rhetoric, beneath all the fine interlocking chain links of racial ideology are real human bodies, and the bodies are constantly churning. One of the recurring criticisms of Ta-Nehisi Coates is that he fetishizes race in his writing, and there's something to that. You can't engage meaningfully with race and its myths without running the risk of being seduced by it, and I think that's a line Ta-Nehisi is going to wrestle with for the rest of his career. But I think it's a good thing to wrestle with because it's something we all need to wrestle with. Living inside race without getting engulfed by it. Ta-Nehisi Coates helps us to see that even as we struggle to navigate our racial and national myths, that underneath it all are real human bodies, and we have to remember them. We have to remember that bodies breathe. We have to remember that bodies break.
I'm not the victim here. I know one thing from another. And I know I'm going to born and I'm going to be, I was born, I'm going to suffer, and I'm going to die. And the only way you get through life is to know the worst things about it. I know that a person is more important than anything else. Anything else.